This video is sponsored by Skillshare. I bought 5 broken Xbox Series X consoles on eBay. Let's get them unboxed and see what all's wrong, and I'll answer your questions along the way. This first Xbox Series X didn't come in a retail box. We've got some glue on the front that should be easy to get off. And it definitely has been taken apart before. At least these 2 screws have been taken apart, and the seal has been broken here. So somebody's tried to fix this one already. We'll get to the diagnosis here in a minute. Let's get to the next Xbox. Hey, this one looks like it actually comes with all of the retail packaging. And does it have this one comes with the controller as well. Controller is in nice condition. Even has batteries in it. Okay, cool. Now let's check out the console. On the side of the box, this one does say no power. We'll be able to test that in just a minute here. Let's see what kind of condition it's in. All right, and we have one that has not been taken apart and is in pretty good condition. That doesn't sound good. Let's see what we got inside here. Okay, here's the console. Okay, that looks like probably just some batteries rolling around. No big deal. So the controller on number 3 got some scuff. This controller's definitely been used. It's got some scuffs and some scratches. It's not been taken apart. That's good news. Already got some finger cheese in the cracks. That's gross. And here we go with number 4. Console's just kind of loose in there. Interesting shipping method. We do have a controller, cool. And we got the cables. And the controller looks to be in decent condition. Let's check out the console. And another one that has not been taken apart. That's always good news for me. Okay, pretty good condition. And here we have Xbox Series X number 5. And we have another controller and the console. And the controller looks pretty good. Definitely used, but looks to be in good condition. And the Xbox itself is also in great condition and has not been taken apart. Now that we've gotten a look at all 5, let's plug them in and see what's wrong. So let's try Xbox number 1 and see what happens. Makes noise, that's good. Let's see if it comes up on the screen. Okay, we do get a picture on the screen. So everything seems to be working fine on Xbox number 1. I'm going to put a disc in and see what happens. Okay, and the disc comes up and it's installing. So far, everything seems normal with Xbox number 1. So this is great news so far. I will have to do more testing on this later, but for now, let's move on to Xbox Series X number 2. And here we go with number 2. Okay, we definitely have no power. Okay, let's move on to number 3 and see if we can figure out what's going on with number 3. Okay, for number 3, let's see if it starts up. Okay, it is starting up. Let's see if we get something on the screen. So far, nothing on the screen. I'm going to test the disc while we're testing that. Okay, it does pull the disc in. The disc does seem to be spinning up normally. But unfortunately, we still have no picture, so that seems to be the problem with number 3. Let's move on to number 4. Okay, and here we go, number 4. Bummer. No power on number 4. And now time for number 5. Okay, and here we go, number 5. Let's see what happens. Okay, startup chime, that's good. Oh, looks like we get a power on and off issue. So it looks like number 5 is powering on and then right back off. Now that we have some ideas of what's going on with each of these, it's time to take a look at each one and get them taken apart. So let's start out by testing Xbox Series X number 1. So when I first tested this first Xbox, everything worked fine and I couldn't find anything wrong with it. Now when I just try to power it on, it won't even turn fully on. It will make the beep like it's gonna turn on, but then it won't actually turn on and the light doesn't come on. So I think the first thing we need to do is put in a new power supply, one that we know is good, and see if that will fix the problem. Now the good news so far is it looks like nothing in here has been taken apart. There's no marks on any of these screws. So whoever had this apart, I think, just took the back cover off and then probably didn't go any further. So that's great news. That means that likely nothing in here has been messed with. But now it's time to get down to this power supply and put a known good one in there and see if that'll fix it. So I randomly just decided to try and turn it on again, and now it's working just fine. I'm not sure what I would have done that would have changed it. I don't see anything I would have done that would make it work randomly. So now I'm not sure what to think of this one. Oh, there we go. Now it's doing the same thing. Okay, so it did turn on several times, but now you can see it's back to doing the exact same thing. So what I'm gonna do is get more of this apart, and then once I have all the guts out of the middle, then I'll actually try and start it up with it just sitting on my bench once I have all the pieces out, and then we'll see what it does. Okay, and now we have this Xbox out of its enclosure. Let's try and turn it on. Definitely not. It is making some noise over here though. I'm gonna get my microphones up close, so hopefully you'll be able to hear that. So it's kind of like a little bit of a tick or a pop right in here. Let's try one more time. Okay, and this time we actually get a light right here. So this time it's actually fully turning on. I don't want it to turn it on too long. Oh, there it goes off. I don't want to have it on too long because we don't have a fan on here. That is interesting though. It'll randomly turn on and off. So I feel like the chances of it being just the power supply are probably not good. I almost feel like maybe there's something going on in here. But it could be still the power supply. There is a possibility that maybe it's not sending enough power into the motherboard. So I'm still gonna try and put a new known good power supply in this and then see what happens from there. Now I've got a known good power supply installed in this Xbox Series X. I know that because I usually make very clever markings such as good. So I know that it is indeed a good power supply. So now I'm going to try and turn it on and see if it'll stay on. So far so good. I'm going to try and turn it back off and turn it back on several times and see if it works normally or if it turns off on its own like it was doing. So with this known good power supply, this Xbox Series X is working flawlessly. I've turned it off and on several times, and there have been absolutely no problems. It's staying on the whole time, unlike when we had the other power supply in that I think is probably faulty. So let's take that power supply apart and see if we can figure out what's going on with it. And I have to start off this segment by saying, please don't mess with power supplies on your own. These things can give you a very bad shock, and if you don't know what you're doing, you can hurt yourself very badly, so just please don't try this at home. I, however, am a trained YouTube professional, so I'm gonna dig in. That was just a joke. I have lots of experience outside of YouTube, which is why I'm opening this power supply. So now I have to try and remove this top cage. We've got these plastic clips right here that we need to disengage. Now we need to remove this bottom plastic from the top plastic. And there we go. Now we have the inside of the power supply open and we can start diagnosing it. I can tell you right now, this power supply looks different than the other known good power supply that I have, but I bet it has most of the same parts. Now, in order to really see what's going on here, we need to remove this green board from this bottom plastic piece, and most likely it's got a bunch of epoxy down there, which makes it a real pain to get off. So I just use some plastic tools and just start prying up wherever I can. Okay, that actually wasn't that bad. That was way easier than the other ones I've done, and there's nothing on the bottom here. So then we've got a heat plate down here that we need to remove. So I need to desolder here, 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 and actually it looks like all. So we'll get that off, and then we'll see what's underneath. All right, and I immediately see what I think most likely is the problem with this. You can see this brown spot here. This probably indicates that the chip underneath is getting very warm, which probably indicates that the chip is faulty. I'm going to remove all this gunk and see what the chip is that's underneath. It even shows right on the board where the glue is supposed to go. I was thinking this was going to be one large chip, but there are 4 smaller chips here. So next I'm going to get out my thermal camera, then we'll plug it back in and see if we get any one of these heating up. Okay, and we've got our thermal camera ready. Now I just need to plug it in, turn it on, and we'll see if anything gets hot. All right, and you can even see on the thermal cam before I even turn it on, those parts are hot already. Now let's turn it on and see what it does. Okay, and now we have a lot more warmth over there, and it looks like that's the only other place. Now, it is staying on right now, but I bet it will turn off before too long. So it looks like maybe these chips and maybe even this chip is faulty. Woo, that is very warm to the touch. That's definitely a problem. Over 302 degrees Fahrenheit. I can't believe it's staying on, but it is for now. So Xbox Series X #1 needs either a new power supply or to replace those chips on the power supply board. Unfortunately, there's nowhere to find parts right now, and there may not ever be a place to buy these types of parts because Microsoft does not offer parts for anyone to repair this type of a problem. Unfortunately, manufacturers in the US do not have to provide parts for all of the devices they sell. This Xbox could be fixed with just a couple dollar part, but unfortunately, it's just gonna sit here until I can hopefully find a part for it someday. I will keep it around here in my shop in hopes that someday I will be able to find parts for it, but for now, let's move on to Xbox Series X #2. And no power at all. I already suspect maybe we have another power supply issue, but let's get it apart, install the known good power supply, and see what it does. But before I get it apart, I want to tell you about today's sponsor, Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of inspiring classes for creative and curious people. If you're like me, you're always trying to learn new things and get better at the things that you already know. You can take classes in woodworking, photography, video editing, and lots of other great subjects. My favorite class so far is a class by Marques Brownlee called YouTube Success, Script, Shoot, and Edit with MKBHD. The reason I love this class so much is because Marques is one of the best at what he does. So a guy like me can learn a ton from someone like that. One of the best things about Skillshare is they are incredibly affordable. It's less than $10 a month with an annual subscription. The first 1,000 people to use my link in the description will get a free trial of Skillshare Premium membership so you can explore your creativity and maybe even discover some new skills you never knew you had. Now let's get this Xbox Series X torn down. So I've got the entire Xbox Series X taken apart. I have the known good power supply hooked up into the motherboard, so now I'm going to hook it up to power and see if it'll turn on. Okay, we have it connected. Now let's see if we get power. And nothing. So this problem is different than the other Xbox Series X's that I've worked on that have a power problem, because there's just absolutely no power at all getting to anything. All of the other Series X consoles that I've worked on have at least some power. In fact, most of them will turn on and then turn off or not fully stay on. So this should be an interesting one, but I've got to get more of it apart so we can determine what the issue is. So what I'm looking for now is any evidence of any faulty components. So any burn marks, any bubbles on the top of these chips, anything like that that might indicate that the component is faulty. And so far I just see no evidence of any of these components being faulty. And I just see nothing on either of these boards that's obvious. So now I'm going to start checking fuses. Then we'll hook it back up and check for voltages and maybe even run our thermal camera over it to see if there's any obvious problems that way. Okay, so we have this all apart, but together enough that I can install the power supply to check voltages and make sure we're getting voltage where we need it. This is definitely the recommended setup for testing. That's a joke. Like I said before, don't try this at home, please. Okay, we're gonna test for 12 volts down here. And we do not have 12 volts. Let's test for 12 volts down on the bottom pins. There's not 12 volts down on the bottom pins either. So the only thing I can think of is this power supply may somehow sense when this connector is plugged in and may sense one of the chips on the board, and that tells the power supply to turn on possibly. I could be wrong though. I'm going to disconnect these cables and then see if we have the 12 volts on our pins on the power supply. Let's check our voltage. Okay, we do have 12 volts now, so that means there's some way that this power supply is communicating with the motherboard, and that's making it so the power supply is not sending voltage to the motherboard to turn on. So I don't know if it's this side or this side, so I'm going to plug this in and see if those voltages go away. Okay, we still have 12 volts. So my thinking is that it's probably not a problem up here, but a problem down on this bottom motherboard. Now, I am not an expert at diagnosing a lot of these board level power problems, so this is kind of all just experimenting, so I could be wrong in some of my reasoning, but this is what makes sense to me, so I'm going to start looking at this bottom board, see if I can find any short circuits, anything that could possibly be causing problems. So the next thing I'm going to do is check for resistance between the positive and negative pins on the power supply connector. This is the positive side right here. This is the negative side. Okay, that's a problem. So we only have 10 ohms between this side, the positive and negative. There should be very, very, very high resistance, and this is showing very low resistance. That means that likely one of these components that is attached to both the ground and the positive is shorted out, so now it's just a matter of figuring out which one it is. So I've done a little more checking and I just see nothing obvious going on this motherboard. So next I have to figure out the most efficient way to figure out where this short is. Now this is obviously a very massive short because right at the main connector where it gets the power, there is a short between the ground and the power pins. So as far as I can tell, the power goes over here to this fuse, then it comes over here and is distributed through each of these capacitors and into these coils, and somewhere in there it's also distributed over here. So my plan is the first thing I'm going to do is remove each of these, and each time I remove one I will test and see if the short is gone, not because I think these are faulty, but that should tell me which part of the circuit the fault is located. Then once I know that, I can start narrowing down the components that are downstream of these components. So I'm just going to take my hot air station and remove each one of these, check to see if that's the circuit. If it's not, then I will put it back on. And once again, there's probably better ways of doing this. I'm doing what makes sense to me based on my knowledge and experience. Two of the questions I know you probably have are how much did I pay for these Xboxes and where did I buy them? I started buying these broken Xboxes on eBay as soon as I saw them start selling broken ones on eBay, and I paid between $400 and $700. Now if you saw the video where I bought 13 broken PS5s, I bought those from a liquidation company, whereas these Xboxes I bought directly from eBay sellers. So as I started going through and testing each one of these, I found that these, once I take them off, then the short is gone, except for one. Let me show you. So as we start down here, OL, 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 but then once we get to this one, we show a 42 ohm reading, which is pretty close to the same reading we have down here right on the connector for the power. Also one more up here, we get OL. So this seems to be the circuit that is causing the problem. So that leads me to believe that it may be this component right here. Now, if you saw my last Xbox Series X video, you'll remember that this component was completely shorting out, causing the motherboard to even smoke. So that's the other thing that leads me to believe that this could be the problem. So I'm gonna remove this component right here, then I'll do all that testing again and see if we have removed the short. And now with this component removed, we can flip this over and see if that took care of the short. Okay, come on, did that fix it? Oh, this is good news. Okay, so that definitely took care of that problem. We no longer have an issue there. So now all we have left to figure out is whether there's some problem that caused that chip to go bad or whether that chip just went bad on its own. So I think what I'm going to do is replace that chip, then put all these components back on, and then we can test it some more and make sure that short stays gone. Okay, here we go. Great news, no short. So this is great news. I think maybe this one is fixed. I need to put all these coils back on and then we'll plug it in and give it a try. Well, it's definitely not the straightest line I've ever seen, but they're soldered on well, and I don't get paid for straight lines. So now let's check and see if that short is back. And we have OL. That's great news. So next I'm going to get this hooked up to a power supply and see if it'll finally turn on. Let's plug it in and hopefully we don't let out the magic smoke. Good so far. Power? Yes! That's amazing. Now it did power off on its own. That could be just because we don't have everything connected. I don't know for sure, but I think when I've tested these before, they've done the same thing. So far, this is great news. I think we have this one fixed. This was a tough one. I'm gonna get this put back together so we can test it fully and make sure it gets a picture up on the screen. But so far, this one is looking good. I think we all know the real problem with this is just that it didn't have the perfect amount of thermal paste. There we go. So number 2, we have all back together, but will it turn on and show a display? Let's check it out. Okay, staying on, that's good. Let's see if it shows up on the screen. Come on. Oh yeah, so number 2 is fixed. I'm not gonna lie, that one felt good. But now it's time to move on to Xbox Series X number 3. Xbox Series X number 3 turns on but has no display. At least that's what it did the first time I tried it. So let's just verify that and then we'll get it apart and see if we can figure it out. So the TV does recognize that there's something hooked up, but there's obviously still no display. I'm automatically thinking possibly the HDMI read driver or possibly the little BGA booster chip. So I'm gonna get this thing taken apart so we can take a look at the motherboard. Now, as I was taking this Xbox apart, I noticed the problem. With it up on its side, can you see the problem? I'll give you a hint. It's right over here. If you notice, the inside of this port has been totally pushed back, so the reason this isn't showing up on the TV is because the inside of the port with all the pins on it is not connecting with the HDMI cable. So I need to get this bottom board out so I can replace this HDMI port. So this shows the problem pretty well. This piece is the back, and the back has just been totally pushed out. Hopefully we don't have problems with the actual traces on the motherboard, but we won't know that until we get this one off. So I'm going to start up my hot air station and heat these mounting pins down here and heat up all the pins in the back and let this port just drop out, and then we'll inspect the board. Alright, and here is the old HDMI port. You can see how these pins are just all bent and this whole thing was just shoved back. But the good news is that on the motherboard, I don't see any torn traces. Another question I'm sure that lots of you have is, am I going to be selling these, and if so, where? I'm going to be doing the same thing with these as I did with those 13 PS5s. I'm going to offer several to my patrons as well as channel members. So if you would like to get a chance to purchase one of these consoles, you can do that by becoming a patron or a channel member. Also, please note, I don't sell any of these through people contacting me in the comment section of any of my videos. And if someone does try and contact you in the comment section telling you that they'll sell you one, it's a scam. So please don't buy anything from them because you'll never get anything. In fact, one of the best things you can do is use the number they give you and call them and waste their time. The only way scammers are not going to leave those kind of comments is if we can waste enough of their time to make it not worth it for them. And now we have the port fully installed. We have all of the HDMI pins soldered onto the traces on the motherboard. So now it's time to put this Xbox Series X back together and see if it works. So did we fix Xbox number 3? Let's find out. Okay, black screen. Come on. There we go, we've got a picture. That means Xbox number 3 is all fixed and it's time to move on to number 4. Yes. And I'm just gonna double check that number 4 doesn't power on. And definitely shows no power at all. I'm guessing probably another power supply issue, but I gotta get it apart so we can check that out. Okay, and now I have number 4 torn down to the power supply connector right here. Since we already have had a similar problem with one of the other Xbox Series X's that I have, I figured I might as well just test that first. So I'm gonna probe down into this connector and see if the positive and negative terminals are shorted together. And they are. So I'm gonna get this Xbox torn down to this bottom board down here and see if number 4 has the same problem as number 2. So on number 2, the issue was this chip right here. So I'm just gonna start by removing this chip, see if the short is gone, and if not, then I'll just start removing each one of these chips until we find the short gone. Okay, let's see whether that was it. Ah, no, so there is a short somewhere else. So I'm just gonna start removing these one at a time until the short goes away. So I just noticed that the way I was testing to see if these were still shorted was not effective. I was testing between these two pins right here, but I actually need to be testing just on this power supply connector, because when I test on that, this is showing OL, which is great news. So now I need to add these back on one at a time and see which one causes the short, then I'll know which one to replace. And this is the one that's faulty, so I'm gonna remove that, put all the rest back on, and then I will put a replacement chip right in this one's place. Okay, and here we go. What do we think? It looks like they're all lined up mostly correctly. Let's test and see if the short is gone. And there we go. There is no longer a short on this board. Let's put it back together and see if it'll turn on. So I have this one together just enough to test, and I'm gonna plug it in and let's see if it'll turn on. Eject button works. Okay, and there we go. Now I don't want to leave it on too long because I don't have the fan hooked up or anything. So number 4 is fixed. Let's move on to the last one, number 5. I can't believe that we've been able to fix all of them so far, assuming we ever get all the parts we need. Hopefully that doesn't jinx us for number 5. Let's take a look. So here we have number 5. The first time I tested it, it would power on and then right back off. Let's verify that problem. There we go. I thought it was going to stay on for a second. So now I need to get this one taken apart and see if it's the power supply or the motherboard. Now we're down to the power supply. I'm going to remove this power supply and put in our known good power supply. Plug in the power button. And now we can test it with the known good power supply. So here we go. Do you think it's going to work with this power supply, or do you think there's a problem on the motherboard? Let's find out. Oh. Okay, we got a solid white light. Oh, and then it just powered off. Let's try one more time. Okay, doing the same thing. Now it's time to get down to this bottom motherboard and see if we can figure out what's going on there. And just to be sure, don't ever mess with power supplies, especially power supplies with the cover taken off. All of this stuff in here could give you a really bad shock, so just don't do it. Okay, I don't see any obvious problems right away. I mean, I'm already suspecting one of these chips is possibly faulty, but it does worry me because it does turn on for a second and then it turns back off. So that's going to be probably much harder to diagnose than just a straight short to ground. So for Xbox Series X number 5, I've tried installing a known good upper motherboard that's got the south bridge on it. That didn't do anything. I've tried a new power supply. I've tried a known good SSD, and unfortunately, I just can't figure this one out yet. I'm definitely going to keep this around, so if I ever do fix it, I'll be able to update you in another video. Also, a while back, I made an Xbox Series X video that had another power issue. If you want to see that, I'll put it up on your screen now if you want to come hang out with me over there and see what the problem was with that one. Thank you again to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. Again, I'll have the link down in the description if you would like to sign up for Skillshare and learn some new skills. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today and watching this video, and I hope you have a good one.